Hope is something every human needs, yet it often feels fragile, especially in a world filled with uncertainty. People today wake up to news that can shake their confidence, face pressures that drain their energy, and go through personal struggles that make them wonder if things will ever get better. In times like these, hope can feel distant. But the Bible, especially the book of Psalms, reminds us that hope is not just wishful thinking. It is a confident expectation rooted in the character of God. The Psalms were written thousands of years ago, yet they speak directly to the struggles of our hearts today, offering words that lift, strengthen, and remind us that no matter how dark things look, hope is still alive. The Psalms are raw, honest, and deeply human. They were written by people who faced fear, betrayal, loneliness, sickness, and war. They are songs of praise, cries for help, confessions of weakness, and declarations of faith. And through all of them runs a steady theme. Hope in God is powerful, unshakable, and available to anyone who seeks Him. When David wrote, "The Lord is my shepherd," he wasn't speaking from comfort. He was often speaking from caves, from battles, from seasons of hiding. Yet, in the middle of chaos, he found confidence in God's presence and care. That same hope can carry us today. Hope matters because it fuels perseverance. Without hope, people quit. They stop trying, stop believing, stop expecting anything good. But with hope, even a small amount, people find the strength to keep going. Psalm 27 says, "I would have lost heart unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living." That verse is more than poetry. It is a confession from someone who stood on the edge of despair, but found courage by trusting in God's goodness. Hope doesn't deny reality. It looks beyond it. It doesn't ignore the pain. It anchors us in the truth that God is still working. One of the reasons hope is so important is that it connects us to something bigger than our circumstances. When everything around us feels unstable, hope reminds us that God is steady. When our plans fall apart, hope reminds us that God's purpose stands firm. Psalm 46 declares, "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble." Notice that it doesn't say God prevents trouble. It says He is with us in it. Hope isn't the absence of storms. It's the assurance that God is in the boat with us. And when we know that, we can face anything. Life can feel overwhelming, but the Psalms show that we are not alone in our struggles. In Psalm 34, David wrote, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." These words are for the person whose heart feels heavy with disappointment. They are for the one mourning a loss, carrying a burden, or silently fighting battles others don't see. Hope matters because it reminds us that God sees, God cares, and God draws near. He is not distant or indifferent. He steps into our hurt and offers comfort. The Psalms also teach us that hope is something we sometimes have to speak to ourselves. In Psalm 42, the writer repeatedly says, "Why, my soul, are you downcast? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise Him." It's a moment of self-encouragement. Sometimes our hearts forget what our minds know. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves that God has been faithful in the past, and He will be faithful again. The writer of this psalm wasn't denying his distress. He was choosing to point his heart back to truth. Hope often begins with that choice, to believe God's promises even when emotions pull us in a different direction. Another reason hope matters is that it changes our perspective. Psalm 121 opens with the words, "I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord." Lifting our eyes is a powerful image. When we focus only on our problems, they grow bigger. But when we lift our eyes to God, we remember that He is bigger still. Hope shifts our gaze from what is wrong to the one who makes things right. It transforms fear into faith and discouragement into determination. The Psalms are filled with reminders that hope is not passive, it's active. It involves trusting, praying, seeking, and waiting. Psalm 37 says, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him." Waiting is not easy, especially when life feels urgent. But hope teaches us that God's timing is perfect. What feels like a delay to us may be preparation in God's eyes. Hope believes that God is working behind the scenes, even when we see no evidence in front of us. Hope also strengthens us in the face of fear. Psalm 23, one of the most beloved psalms, says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." This verse does not promise a life without dark valleys. It promises a God who walks with us through them. Fear tells us we are alone. Hope reminds us that God's presence is our greatest protection. When we know He is with us, fear loses its power. Another reason hope matters is because it shapes our identity. Psalm 139 tells us we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that God knows every detail of our lives, that His thoughts toward us are precious and countless. In a world where people struggle with insecurity, comparison, and self-doubt, hope reminds us that our worth comes from God, not from our circumstances. When we know who we belong to, we can stand confidently even when life feels uncertain. Sometimes hope feels distant because we are tired. Exhaustion can drain our faith and blur our vision. But Psalm 91 promises rest under the shadow of the Almighty. It reminds us that we can find refuge, not by trying harder, but by drawing nearer to God. Hope grows when we rest in Him, not in our ability, not in our strength, but in His unchanging character. The Psalms encourage us to run to God, not away from Him, when life becomes too much. One of the most powerful truths the Psalms reveal is that hope is grounded in God's unchanging nature. Psalm 102 says, "The earth will perish, but you remain. Your years have no end." Everything around us may shift, economies, relationships, plans, but God stays the same. He is faithful, loving, and sovereign. That is why we can place our hope in Him, not because life is predictable, but because God is dependable. Hope matters because it points us toward the future God has for us. Psalm 30 says, "Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning." This verse is not just poetic, it is prophetic. It reminds us that pain is temporary, but God's promises are eternal. Every night season ends. Every valley has a mountaintop on the other side. Hope pulls us forward when circumstances try to keep us stuck. It whispers, "This is not the end." The Psalms also remind us that hope is contagious. When we hold on to hope, we encourage others around us. Psalm 40 says, "He lifted me out of the pit. Many will see and put their trust in the Lord." When people witness God's work in our lives, they find the courage to trust Him with their own. Hope spreads. It lights the way for others who feel lost. It becomes a testimony that God can restore anyone, no matter how deep the pit or how long the struggle. In moments when hope feels impossible, the Psalms teach us to remember. Over and over, the writers recall God's past miracles, His faithfulness, His protection. Psalm 77 says, "I will remember the deeds of the Lord." Remembering is powerful. When we remember how God carried us before, we find strength to believe He will carry us again. Hope grows when we rehearse God's faithfulness rather than our fears. Ultimately, hope matters because it anchors our souls. Psalm 62 declares, "My soul finds rest in God alone. My hope comes from Him." Hope rooted in God is not fragile. It cannot be shaken by circumstances or stolen by fear. It is grounded in who God is, not in what we see. That is why hope still matters today. Because God is still who He has always been. He is still faithful, still powerful, still loving, still present. So as you reflect on the Psalms and the message of hope they carry, remember this. Hope is not something you need to manufacture. It is something God offers freely. It grows when you trust Him, when you seek Him, when you speak His promises over your life. Hope does not deny the struggle. It declares that God is greater. It does not erase pain. It transforms it. It does not eliminate storms. It gives you an anchor within them. No matter what you're facing today, no matter how heavy your heart feels or how uncertain your future looks, the Psalms remind you that hope is not lost. God is with you. He hears your prayers. He sees your tears. He holds your future. And He invites you to place your hope in Him, a hope that is steady, strong, and unshakable. A hope that has carried generations before you and will carry you too. Hope still matters because God still moves, God still speaks, and God still restores. And the story He is writing in your life is not finished yet.